Well, 3 times apparently a charm. That's what Taco Bell is hoping. The fast food chain serves 2 billion customers every year in 27 countries outside of the US. But in the Australian market previously, it has just not managed to crack it. It has completely fizzled. So they're saying now is absolutely the right time.
Yeah, that's the topic that kicks off our panel debate here on Your Money Live. We always do this Your Money Live taking stock. We're lucky enough to have entrepreneur and investor Jack Delosa, founder and CEO of The Entourage, and Claire Kimball, founder of The Squiz, female-focused daily newsletter. So, thank you both very much for joining us. Taco Bell, thoughts, gross or good? Are we happy about this?
You have to establish if anyone's tasted it.
Yeah, that's a good point. It hasn't been available for a while.
That's the issue.
You cannot believe it will last in Australia if you actually tasted it.
Yeah.
The interesting thing, I think, is around this change in consumer dynamics to healthier options. So it'll be interesting to see. Surely it's got a better chance this time than the previous times, I think, with more vegetarian offers, vegan offers. We'll see. It's a tough game, though.
I'd agree with that. Last time they came was 1998, and so it was pre this Mexican wave we've seen over the last 5 to 8 years with the Guzman and Gomez's and salsas, and so I think the Mexican market has become incredibly popular in Australia. You know, the Australian retail market is very Americanised. So. I mean,
how many times have you been to the States and you've just come back dying for good Mexican food?
Yeah, well,
they do it so well. So fingers crossed.
But so they're really not mucking around here. 50 stores they're planning on opening very quickly.
Yeah.
So they're not mucking around. They've got 1 store so far, and they said that's gone really well. So they're just going hell for leather with these 50 stores. Can you go too fast here?
Interesting that they've only named Queensland, which clearly is where they've already started. No doubt the real estate game means they probably won't really be sort of telegraphing their punches quite yet about where they're going to go. Yeah. If you've got a bit of a block of land that you're looking, no doubt you'd be jacking up your prices right now if it's going to be a good Taco Bell site. But, you know, we'll see. I think Guzman y Gomez has about 70 sites or so. They've got a pretty good saturation right now, so we'll see.
Yeah, my assumption is that it'll be performance-based. You know, if they roll out 3 to 5 stores and the stores aren't being successful, then everybody's losing money, and they'll probably pull stumps similar to what they did last time. So I do think there'll be like.
So this is a bit of a PR involved. We're going to be so good. We're going to open 50 stores, but in fact, like, we'll just see how we go at the start. We might get to 50. Okay, it's a bit of their own publicity, which we've just fallen right into that trap, perhaps. The other thing is, I thought it was interesting. They were saying, of course, there'd be a little bit of an Australian twist. That's so crucial, though, isn't it? Because you think of Starbucks. Came here, didn't offer anything the Australians wanted, had to leave. I guess we've had a couple of examples like that. What do you guys find in your own businesses offers the Australian twist? What do we like as Australians?
Language for me, definitely language. It has to be straight. You can't muck around with the flowery, corporate, evasive language. Straight and neat is the way for me,
I think Claire hit the nail on the head before in terms of coming into the Australian market. My sense is the Australian market is a bit more health conscious. So I think if they can do that side of things well, then, you know, they've got the money behind them to really have a crack at it.
Well, I mean, we say that, Jack, and I think that that's absolutely true. But also, the stock on the ASX that's been kind of behind all this is Collins Food, which is handling KFC, Taco Bell and Sizzler. And it's actually had a strong couple of months. So I wonder, you know, are we on the ground thinking healthy eating is the go, but in investment circles, perhaps not? I mean, what do you think?
I think it's a very good point, and it absolutely depends, right? No one goes to KFC for health food, but what McDonald's has done in that space is really interesting with McCafe and the complete new health menu, and so that's been an adjunct and an add-on to their business that comprises probably 30% of their product offering now. So I think in the field of Mexican, if I was doing it, I would want to play the health card as much as possible, but there is absolutely a market for fast food that is not healthy. So
actually, I had a viewer already send me something on Twitter saying, yeah, no one else does drive-through burritos. Why wouldn't I want to use that? Sure, I mean, there's a gap in the market.
And we do all love burritos, right? Like, that's a universal thing.
Simple as that. Thank you, Richard, one of my Twitter followers. Let's talk about Malcolm Turnbull. and this story today about his allowance, which, as the story says, allows for the provision of resources when he's asked to travel from time to time overseas by the government. I think one of the lines is that Morrison is trying to buy Turnbull's silence and just kind of send him off. But can you help us understand allowances? Because Claire, you were working with Tony Abbott for many, many years, so you have kind of dealt in this space quite specifically.
Yeah, and actually when I first started in politics way back in '98, there had just been that spate of travel issues. You might remember with many ministers being sacked over travel rewards and all sorts of things. And my very first chief of staff had been through all of that, so I'm well versed in entitlements and how this all works. The Prime Minister's stuff and the ex-Prime Minister's stuff is very interesting though, because it's when you're out of politics, you still have to have a bit of a public presence. There's still a demand for your time. The overseas thing, though, is very unusual. And what's happened in the past, say, to go to funerals overseas or to undertake business on behalf of the government overseas, Prime Ministers just write you a letter and away you go. The government covers those sort of flights. So I don't know whether... It's interesting, too, that Turnbull has said that he hasn't requested that. So whether there's something afoot that we might be looking at some more ad hoc kind of things. Kevin Rudd, I'm sure, would be very interested in that, given he was quite a New York,
because the issue is they say no other former Prime Ministers have it listed in their schedule of allowances. That's right. So there is something different about it.
And look, if I was Malcolm Turnbull, go for your life for the next 9 months, I reckon Bill Shorten will probably change that if he gets into government. Probably be off his schedule very quickly.
I would really challenge that. I know that's what the heading says, but every Prime Minister, from Julia Gillard, Bob Hawke, Kevin Rudd, they have all travelled on government business post their Prime Ministership. And so all that's happening here is they've just put it into the contract and the agreement so that it's formal. The article actually says he'll be travelling overseas on government business, so it's not personal travel. You know, I think this is like the height of media spin, because we all see that he's in New York, and then the headline says, you know, the government are paying for travel. The New York trip, he's paying himself. He's staying in his own home in New York. The travel is for government business, which he has said he may not even do. And so I think this is just a storm in a teacup.
I think though, Jack, it's interesting. Are we telegraphing something here that we don't know? What does the Morrison government have in mind for Malcolm Turnbull?
Yeah, that's probably the bigger...
In terms of government business on our behalf. It's an interesting one.
Well, Turnbull has you know, represented the government at the UN headquarters before, you know, international sort of advocacy type.
So he's a known face. It makes sense he'd kind of go back there for us.
This is just standard business as usual. That's happened to every Prime Minister for the last, looks like 20 years or so. I don't think this is an issue.
One of the other stories that we've read in our news today is about Labor saying they'll fund 3-year-old preschoolers. It's almost $2 billion they've elected. Some people saying, wow, where'd that money from behind the couch come from? That's nice. Thank you. So have you guys got to say where you reckon that money from behind the couch goes, Claire?
It looks like aged care is going to have to be a bit of a spend. You can't have a Royal Commission without something coming out of that, and clearly funding is an issue there. I think we're heading into an election cycle. You've got to tick those boxes of education, health. They're the big money spenders, but state governments come into that, and that where I think this one becomes quite interesting, given do the states have to match this? Preschool is a state responsibility. Also childcare, I mean, it's a whole can of worms, this one.
That's right. It was kind of debated, I think, behind the curtain as to whether or not Bill Shorten should shrink away and just sort of let the Liberal Party spill and all that sort of thing combust them a little bit, or get out there and really make some calls. And obviously it looks like he is. Jack, what do you think? Do you think early childhood care, or do you think aged care?
Yeah,
startups.
Well, I think both. In this particular story, what Bill Shorten is saying is that he's taken the money from unfair features of negative gearing. So he's essentially revising tax for somewhat wealthy people and reallocating that to educate more children, which I think is an incredibly positive thing for Australia.
Unfortunately, we do have to leave it a bit early, Claire and Jack. We've got an interesting thing that we really have to rush off to. But thank you so much for joining us in the studio.
Thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Appreciate it.